Welcome to Company Showcase, an advertising feature on HowStreet.com.
I'm Jim Goddard. I'm speaking with Jim Pettit, CEO and President of Aben Resources. Welcome back to the show, Jim.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
Jim, it must be March madness around the offices with spring right around the corner.
Well, it's there's no shortage of things going on here with the now confirmed pandemic, and the markets are a lot of fun, and they're interesting to watch right now. It's just anybody's guess. But, we're moving ahead. We've got lots on our plate through this off season of drilling. We haven't put a news release out since November. So, the guys have been just compiling data, reviewing the data, and coming up with some interesting drilling plans for this coming year up in the Forrest Kerr.
And what are those plans, and where exactly are they taking place?
Well, this is going to happen up in the Forrest Kerr. Our property there is called the Forrest Kerr. So it's in the Golden Triangle, northwest quadrant of British Columbia. We've done, in the last 3 years, 20,000 meters of drilling. We have a confirmed high-grade zone. Last year we moved away from it, and it showed us that it's fairly constrained. We're very curious as to where it came from, because that whole valley is very highly mineralized. And as we move south away from it, testing some of these geophysical structures that we see now, that we did a airborne mag survey last May, and we tied in a lot of these structures that show up with the drilling off the flanks of them. To see what we would come up with and how they relate to some of these fault structures we see. And we ended up coming up with an awful lot of good, low-grade intersections, like broad intersections of lower grade. Not necessarily what we're looking for. The market certainly wants high grade. So going forward, knowing what we know now, with the extensive drilling we did do last year, we realize now that there's another fault there we weren't terribly aware of, or at least not paying attention to, because it didn't have the ground geochem associated to it. But as we drilled south, we now realize that it's called the Benchland Fault. It's as you drill along it, there's a lot of mineralization, and it looks like it's coming off that fault, and that's as we move south. If we have a pretty sweet target to try to figure out what's going on in the high grade zone, where it came from, that sort of thing. It's just to the west. It's across the creek fault, which is in the bottom of the valley, and it's got our interest because we're looking for a heat source, because that whole north boundary area has got some, as well as the normal alteration. It's also got potassic alteration. And as you move south, that potassic alteration goes away, and that's generally associated to a heat source. So it's there somewhere. And there is a very large anomaly across the creek fault from where the north boundary is. It hasn't been tested. It's blind because it's covered in scree, but it shows up, and it's very large. So that's going to be one of our targets next year, trying to isolate that a bit and figure out if that's a heat source, or drill deeper underneath. And then as we head south, we've got this new fault that looks to be controlling an awful lot of mineralization as you head south. So there's a fair amount of work ahead of us. We're just fine-tuning some things right now, and we'll be ready to go.
Now, Jim, some of the analysts I've been talking to say even with a market meltdown, gold juniors, for some reason, and you probably know why, are still holding in there, because I'm sure with gold being seen as a source of security, the source of that source is an important thing to have around.
Yeah, it is. It's if we can prove up something like that this coming season, it'll change the game for us. We've held our own during this downturn. Indicates to me that we're every season after we finish drilling by November, we're at another low. And then it comes back again, May, June, July. And depending on, what we come up with, it will dictate if it'll stay up there or come back down to these traditional lows. But it's been fairly consistent. Last year it didn't hit the highs you had the previous 2-3 years, but that was just because the grades were not the high grades that the market wants. So I get it. We are already sitting at our lows, so we're not getting influenced a whole lot by the downturn in the markets right now. Whereas a lot of guys with much higher market caps, they got room to move down, and they're coming down. There's some pretty good buys out there when this is all said and done.
Is that an important message for people to know? Plus, we know people like John Kaiser is trying to convince people under 55 that mining's a great place to invest your money. Look at how the cryptocurrencies and marijuana have not worked out for them.
Well, as long as they sold, it worked great. That's the same old adage. I know what John's saying. It's we're looking at let's put aside this pandemic right now and the oil fight between the Saudis and the Russians. We have a really good market underlying it all. But we also had a resurgence in gold, and you had a lot of the juniors starting to move up. Now that's reversed, but I think they'll be, once things settle down, I would think that you'll see gold starting to move again, because we've just been through a couple of weeks or a week and a half of throwing the baby out with the bathwater because, margins were called. When that happens on a big scale, like in the States on the Dow, they have to sell everything to raise money to cover their margins, and caught everybody off guard. And so gold gets sold. Everybody's asking why is gold going down? Well, it was getting sold heavily because it was one of the only assets they had left they could sell, and that's on a very, very, very grand scale.
And again, a lot of the people we've been talking to are very bullish on gold long term. And again, mining isn't something you do for a day and then walk away. No,
no, not at all. As time goes on, it takes longer and longer to take a discovery through to production. Minimum 10 years now. It's probably greater than that. I'm not really sure, but 10 to 15 years. It's a long time. The time frame's much broader than most investors. So if you're lucky enough to be involved in a junior that does have a discovery and can take it further along, that's where your greatest upside is. That's generally why people are looking, and why John is saying, they should be looking at this. We're looking at a market that, all things being equal, is actually, it should be a good market, but we've got these roadblocks in the way right now, and I think it's just a matter of time. Gold will, it wants to go higher.
Jim, can you give us a bit of a background for Aben Resources?
Well, Aben's gold exploration company. We've got our flagship property is the Forrest Kerr. We've still got the property in the Yukon, and actually north of the Justin property, we've got another one called the Hit, which we've never talked about. But they're in an area where, you've got a company like New Gold that's up there sniffing around on the NWT side of the border, because those properties are right situated on the Yukon NWT border. So there's interesting things going on quietly up there. So I don't want to disregard them. We had disappointing results out of the Justin last year because we used a RAB drill, and you can't have groundwater interfering with that. And we did. There was a lot of artisanal water underneath, and it inhibits what you're doing with the core. Like a lot of the heavy metals will get shaken out, and you don't get representative values in it. Anyways, that was tough luck to us at the time, but it's still there. It's a good property. I'm more inclined to find an option partner for it. It's a good property, and it's a qualifying property for anybody who's doing an IPO or anything like that. So it's still of use to us. And then I've got still got an interest in the property in Saskatchewan, the Chico. We started that a couple of years ago, and ended up the natives weren't happy with us being there. It was one of those classics where, we consulted, we did everything we could do, and had a permit and started work, and then they're in the middle of election, and so we just, they didn't want us there. They want us to come back now, so I'm kind of thinking about that, but I'm thinking very heavily about that. And at the same time, there's other evaluations going on, so that's what we're doing right now.
Where are you traded, and where can people get more information?
We're traded on the TSX under the symbol ABN, OTCQB. We're trading under the symbol ABNAF, and on the Bourse Frankfurt E2L2. And they can go. The best place to get information is the website, AbenResources.com.
Jim, thanks a lot for the update.
You bet. Thanks.
I've been speaking with Jim Pettit, CEO and President of Aben Resources. I'm Jim Goddard. Our conversation took place on March 11th.
Comments made on Company Showcase are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at howstreet.com. Company Showcase is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.